What is going on, everybody? Welcome back. Aliens Fireteam Elite 2 is out, and there is already a day 1 patch waiting for you. This thing is enormous. Cold Iron published the full notes, and they run to hundreds of individual fixes across every system in the game. I have read the entire document so that you do not have to. Some of these are the difference between a perk working and a perk lying to you. One of them was handing players over 2 billion of every item in the game. There is a whole block that changes how it feels to get grabbed by an alien. And there is one genuinely new feature buried in here that nobody announced. So let us go through what actually changed. First, the shape of it. The notes cover PC and Xbox Series X and S and PlayStation 5, so everybody gets this on day 1. There is no version number given and no download size listed, so I cannot tell you how big it is. Just let it install fully before you jump in. And here is the fix I would lead with. All 7 of the companion bot perks had completely stopped working in multiplayer games. They were not weakened, they had simply stopped. So if you were planning to run with bots alongside a friend, that entire part of your build was doing nothing at all. They also rebalanced the bots, so they no longer run out of heals as quickly on the higher difficulties. Solo and duo players just got a meaningfully different game. Now, the part I found genuinely surprising, a whole set of perks were not doing what their own text said. The worst offender is hard to hit. It was granting 100% damage reduction instead of 20. That is not a rounding error. That is total immunity handed out by accident. The Didio weapon trait was giving 117.5% stopping power instead of 17.5. Morale Surge was handing out 5 temporary health instead of 2. Those 3 are nerfs back to what was intended, so builds leaning on them just got weaker. The Breaching Blast perk was also cutting armor by 50% instead of 25, but it does go the other way too. Unyielding now actually grants the 50 health it always advertised, up from 10. Bandolier went from 5% max ammo to 9, and Cryo Blast damage per second more than doubled. This is my favorite entry in the whole document. If you joined a match partway through, the game handed you the maximum integer amount of every single item. That is 2,147,000,000 of everything. Every grenade and every stim and every ammo type. That is a classic programming overflow, and it is very funny that it shipped. It is fixed now. So is an exploit that let people pick up first aid kits infinitely, and they closed several map exploits as well. Players could skip a faction fight in a colony mission entirely because the enemies could not leave the room. You could climb terrain to bypass encounters. There were ledges you could stand on that nothing could reach, and one late game encounter could be finished just by running backwards instead of fighting it. Grapple's got an entire block of changes, and this is the one that will change how the game feels. Start with the ugly one. Players could permanently lose the ability to fire their weapon after being grappled repeatedly. That lasted for the rest of the mission, which alone is worth patching on day 1. Then comes the tuning, and it is thoughtful. You now count as evading slightly earlier in the dodge animation, so dodges that felt like they should have worked probably will now. Grappling enemies were tracking toward your feet while you rolled instead of your center. That is why they looked like they teleported onto you. Prowler tracking is now slightly slower when you roll and slightly faster when you move toward them. Enemies no longer get a speed bonus for the angle you happen to be running at, and enemies that failed to grapple were getting stuck and teleporting instead of walking to you. Cover got a long list too, and one line here is a direct callback. In the developer session the night before launch, they explained how the automatic aim side swap works when you enter cover. Somebody clearly flagged it because the patch now says that entering cover while aiming down sights will no longer automatically switch your aim side. That is a real quality of life win. Beyond that, players were visibly jittering while in cover. In multiplayer, you could fire into the wall when standing right at the edge of cover. Clients were rubber banding when mantling over things. Switching weapons while blind firing from low cover caused an awkward stand-up. They also restored a batch of cover animations that were simply missing, including the stun baton and the class deployment animations. A lot of what felt janky in cover was genuinely broken rather than just unfamiliar. Every class has entries here, so let us go quickly. Machinist players get the most. Gas and cryo turrets were able to run out of ammo, which they should not. The bodyguard was deploying on floors above or below you, and in one case, falling through the floor entirely. Several perks were also not applying their bonuses to it at all. Marauder had the same ammo problem on thermal and cryo blast. plus a perk that was simply not reducing cooldown. Duelist explosive rounds got properly rebalanced. They removed a damage penalty that was stacking on top of the existing headshot trade-off. The studio reckons that should make them viable without tipping into overpowered. Medic had 2 core perks not working for clients and one that was buffing the wrong player entirely. Hunter had weak points on synths that clients simply could not see. There is a block here that matters if you care about buildcraft. Elemental ammo now stacks correctly when you use the same type twice. Before this, a second box of incendiary rounds was overwriting the first instead of adding to it. Elemental ammo also refills weapons of that same element now, so electroshock rounds will top up an electric weapon. Piercing rounds can no longer be loaded into explosive weapons because the mechanics were never compatible and it did nothing. The attachment screen was also lying to you and places their own wording lists, typos, and duplicated entries. It also lists conditional effects that were shown as if they were permanent. So if you built around a stat you read off that screen, go and read it again. And small explosions were calculating distance incorrectly, which gave the wrong damage fall off on larger enemies. Here's the new feature I mentioned. They have added region-based matchmaking to help players find better connections. That is an addition rather than a fix, and it is the only genuinely new thing in the whole document. Given this game is peer-to-peer rather than dedicated servers, matching you closer to home matters a lot. On stability, Xbox got the worst of it. The host was crashing when selecting play next mission. The game was crashing repeatedly under certain network conditions. Players could not join a friend after accepting an invite. PlayStation 5 owners had a nastier one. Downloadable content items were resetting to default weapons and armor after saving and loading. There is also a fix for purchased premium content simply not being granted to the player at all. On the enemy side, there is a pattern worth noticing. The phrase AI count limit being exceeded shows up over and over, tied to specific colony missions. That means the game was trying to spawn more enemies than it was allowed to handle. Enemies were also spawning behind cover and pipes and getting stuck there. The Harbinger could spawn and then freeze in a T-pose, which is exactly as unthreatening as it sounds. Companion bots were getting stuck in an A-pose during missions and could get locked out of a science lab encounter completely. Crawler turrets were aiming from the wrong offset and often could not hit you at all. And one boss could freeze during a phase change if you did enough damage to trigger the next phase at the same time. They also rebalanced enemy density on higher difficulties in a late game mission. Now the honest part, because a patch this size can look like everything is solved. There is no known issue section published with these notes. That is not the same as saying nothing is left. It just means the studio has not told us what they are still tracking, and I would rather say that plainly. There is also no new content here. No new missions and no new classes and nothing new to play. This is a stabilization patch, and it is a good one, but it is only that. The reviving question is untouched, so a dead teammate still spectates, and the balance items the team said they would monitor after release are not addressed either. Those were always going to take real player data rather than a launch day build. Watch for a second patch once they have the numbers in. So that is the day 1 patch. 3 things stand out for me. The companion bot perks that were doing nothing in multiplayer and the perks handing out numbers nobody intended. Then the whole grapple rework on top. Make sure it has actually installed before you start, because a lot of these change how your build performs. If you were theory crafting around hard to hit, go back and look at it again. One last one I have to mention. The enemy killed call out was triggering on friendly fire kills, so your squad mates were being insulted for dying to you. Now I want to hear from you down in the comments. Which of these had you already run into, and has anybody actually seen the 2 billion item bug for themselves? Subscribe and turn notifications on, because I will cover the next patch as soon as it lands. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.